Awesome, guys. Well, welcome to episode 2 of 905 Kung Fu with Sifu, Lendell, Moseley, and myself. And, sorry, going to catch you up on what's going on in Kung Fu land. So we were just talking a little bit about how it's going with students and everything and lessons. Let's kind of recap that. So I asked you what's up in your end of the Golden Horseshoe as far as Kung Fu is concerned.
Yeah. So my students now, as I was mentioning, are just getting their first bite out of a real full-length routine. So we're working on Kung Fu basics right now. We're into about the third lesson, and we're working on it's actually the Jingwu version, not the Mantis version. If you recall, with Master Chow, there were two different ones that he had taught us.
Right. I honestly, I always get them confused on which one is number one and which one is number two. We only teach the Jinwu version. I think is that one or is that two? What did he call it?
I don't remember. I don't think it makes a difference which one is one and which one's two, but we know.
But the Jinwu version was a little bit more complex. Is that fair to say?
I think the Mantis version was more complex, to tell you the honest truth. The Jinwu version, I would say, in terms of finding fighting application within the routine, it's more complex.
Okay.
I think the Mantis one is a bit more straightforward, but the fighting concepts that are expressed in the Mantis one, there are so many more. So from another perspective, you could say it's more. I'd say maybe more dense rather than saying it's more complex.
I got you. Okay.
I think the moves are more simple, but there are more techniques within it.
When you put it that way, yeah, I'm totally on board with that. I get that. And the Jinwu form is a little more expressive and a little more of a artsy kind of deal. Yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I agree with you there. And it's kind of funny because that form has a lot of history, and we kind of learned it as the basic form that, Grandmaster Chow would make. So, I don't want to sound bad, but he would take a student in and then teach us, like, the standard form to start with was either like secret force or stomping steps or something like that, or secret force
stomping step. Yeah.
And then if the student couldn't get that, then he would like dial it
you
back.
Kind of regress to Kung Fu basic.
I guess maybe when you're at
it was only us that kind of, like, as the other students, that kind of saw it as kind of like a downgrade or a regression, right? But that was just our personal feelings about it. It's no less a valuable form than any other.
No,
routine, right?
It's a very valuable form. It's just that I think it just shows that as he was, in older age teaching, he didn't have as much patience. And it was like, like if you can do this, then, do this.
Right.
And then kind of walk it back if he saw that, okay, the person needs a little more foundation. But we're actually, no, we demonstrate that form at a graduation a couple times a year. And from what I understood, that's the way that form was initiated, right? Was the Jinwu form, that if you were coming to Jinwu from from different styles, because Jinwu, for you guys who don't know, the Jinwu Athletic Association was kind of not a melting pot, but a school where other styles could come together in unity and train. Well, when they would have their graduations, they would want one form they could all do together. So you would see other students, not just Mantis, but whoever was training at Jinwu at that time, whoever was teaching, whether it was, Mantis or Eco Claw or the Lost Track system, whatever it was, they would all learn that form till they could do it together. So we typically do that twice a year at our Black Sash graduations. You have a bunch of people learn it and they all train it together, and it's it's very cool. It's a good form.
Yeah,
but so how are they? They're just starting to do their form training, or have they sunk their teeth into it already a little bit?
So they're in about third lesson. So basically, what this has brought them around to is the why behind the. They love the horse stance, bow stance transitioning, the training, and they never understood why I used to put them through such an exercise. It was always disconnected for them. But now, as they're going through the form and they get around to lesson 2, when we do the filling punch and then we ward off and chambered punch and horse stance, and they see that shift from horse stance to bow stance and how we generate force transitioning between those two stances. And one of my guys says to me, well, Sifu, now I understand why you put us through some of those things that you made us do. So, all right, good. As long as the understanding comes around eventually, right?
Yeah. It's fun to watch that. That's my brother-in-law. This might seem off topic, but I assure you it's not. But my brother-in-law, he would always, when here in Niagara Falls, whenever he would have someone come and visit, he would want to go and take them through all the things that he had seen, see the falls, see the wax statues, see all this stuff that's like, why do you want to go and see that again? But it's his whole thing was he was like seeing it again for the first time when you're with someone else who's seeing it again for the first time. And there's a lot of delight there that when you see a new student, part of the fun of teaching is when you see them have that light bulb go off, like that's why he made us do this so many hundreds of times. Yeah, now you get it when you just kind of just set your ego aside and go through the motions and have a little faith, and then it comes back and it lights up for you. It's neat to see that, especially for us at no level that I've seen, and I doubt I'll ever see, will you stop having that realization, right? Because we're always training and rediscovering everything. So
yes.
Yeah, I think maybe those times are more frequent when you're beginning, which is why it's fun to teach new students, is because you get that more frequently. So it never stops, but you do get it less frequently, I think, when you've been training for a longer time.
Yeah, I think, well, and that kind of takes my mind down thinking, how do you continue your training once your time moves on, right? You're not going to be with your teacher forever, in no case. So how do you continue learning when your learning is ultimately your responsibility now? And it's where do you continue to find these light bulbs, right? How do we continue to grow? And they may come less and less frequently, but they are no less valuable. They become more and more valuable, really, these later stages. But that's another topic, I think.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so they're getting their footwork transition. That's good. Yeah. And what about their hand techniques? How are they seeing that so far? How are the hands coordinating, or are you just working on footwork so far?
The hands are coordinating pretty well. It's interesting that so I'm trying to balance between having them know what to do with their hands and having them understand what their hands are doing. And the two people in my class who, okay, it's interesting. I'll illustrate this one. Got this these young pair of sisters in the class. They're, I think, maybe 11 and 14 years old. Small, quiet little things. I give the class the last 9 minutes of the class. I say, okay, free practice time. You guys can go and work on whatever you want to work on. The ones who go straight to punching and hooking punches are the two little girls. And I have to stop them and say, look, I love your enthusiasm. All right. I love it. But she's your sister. Okay. You're not trying to take her head off here. But it's interesting to kind of see where the students kind of gravitate. Some students enjoy forms and practicing stance. Some students have to figure everything out and have to know how it works. Some students just want to punch and kick. So it's really interesting trying to balance all these personalities out and make sure that everybody's getting what they need.
Training siblings is always a very interesting mix, because like Kung Fu, for the most part, and that's what I was always drawn to Kung Fu, because I hated well, hate's a strong word. I had severe dislike, disdain for organized competitive sports growing up, right? Now I was kind of always a really small kid, and I was not, always comparing myself to others didn't go very well. So I liked Kung Fu is that this was my, my path on my own. And, martial arts is it is kind of more or less, there's a lot of camaraderie in it, but it is a, you know, a journey on your own, right? And then when you get these siblings working together, it's really interesting to watch. You know, and you're kind of in the same boat. Like you've never, I talked to our older Kung Fu brother, Sifu Adam Ferreira, and he always like mentions this, like he, you know, he always had his training partner, right? And like, I don't know, you and I mean, we work together, you know, occasionally very well, but we never had that person that was there all the time, that we're always trading arms with.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, it's interesting to watch brothers and sisters because they're there all the time. They have that competitive edge. So some of our biggest challenges has been with siblings, because one is constantly comparing themselves to the other, and we're like, no, okay, you got to stop doing that. This is your thing, right? And there's enough to do in Kung Fu where you are going to be really good at one aspect of it, right? Like, yeah, some people are super flexible, and some people are fast, and some people are strong, whatever. There's enough to do. But when you're only focused on how that sibling is better at this thing, you know, that's what gets the focus. It's interesting. Yes. So
I think even there it's potentially even a question of perspective. If it's the case that now you see your, maybe because it's a blood sibling, it's a different thing, right? Like there's a bit more to it than that. But oftentimes when seeing qualities in somebody else that one wishes they had, you can be motivated to work to then gain those qualities. If you're looking at, you know, one of your Kung Fu brothers and say, you know, this person's got a really, really strong horse stance, you know, I don't want to be left behind, so I'm going to train harder to not be left behind by my colleagues, right? It's funny. There's two fellows in my class who confided in me separately that whenever we have tough classes or we're doing certain exercises, they're always looking at the other and pushing themselves to not fall behind. Mm-hmm. And they tell me separately, you know, hey, I'm always looking at this guy, and I don't want to fall behind. But they don't know that they're competing with each other like that. But it makes everybody work harder at the end of the day. If they have that attitude and it affects them positively, go for it. You know, it's when you know that it can be taken another way, conversely, right? So it's really, I guess, to do with the individual.
Yeah, most of the time it's good. It's only, yeah, you're right. It's a negative when the person stops trying. Well, what's the point? Because they're always going to be better, right? And a big lesson in Kung Fu, and I wish I could tell people this when they're considering, because this is one of the things that people won't try to step on the mat. They won't get into Kung Fu because they think they don't have any natural talent for it. Mm-hmm. And that's like the biggest error right there. Like the illusion of natural talent will hold you back. There is no natural talent in Kung Fu. It's not congruent to the meaning. The meaning is the skill that you acquire after time and sacrifice, right? And the struggle, the value in the system is the struggle that you go through in order to gain the skill. If there's no struggle and you're naturally talented, well, then there's no Kung Fu. You're not, you know, yeah, exactly. And often you see, you know, I think we might have talked about this last time, but often you see students who are naturally talented at it will train for a while, improve very, very fast. And then as soon as they hit some other kind of adversity, they just bottom out and they quit. And they're like, oh, this is too hard. Whereas someone who struggled from the very beginning, who, you know, couldn't get their knee up above their waist or whatever, right? They're going through the whole time. And they've dealt with this adversity all the way from the beginning. So when something happens that is really a struggle, and often it's something outside of the actual training on the floor, right? They've already gone through like all kinds of trial to get there. Whereas the person who's talented, as soon as they hit adversity, and it could be anything, it could be like, you know, they had a disagreement with, you know, with a fellow student or something like that, and they're just uncomfortable, and then they just quit because everything's been easy up until now. So, you know, you have to embrace those struggles. And then if, again, not to say that the person with talent is behind. It just means that their struggle is pushed ahead, right? So now their struggle is, well, you've got to learn to deal with adversity and not be lucky and talented through everything, right? That ends up being the struggle. So either way, right. You struggle and emerge.
Right. This is where you might find that the kid that is naturally talented never completes their training. The one may struggle and have to work hard, but at the end of the day, they may earn something that they get to keep, right? Whether it's the esteem of having achieved the grade, or the physical certificate or the belt or whatever it might be. But the point is that there is now evidence of that struggle and of your perseverance, right? Where in the other case, there's really only evidence of failure, to put it bluntly, right?
And that's where the confidence actually comes from. So we were talking about this a little bit before, is that people often say, oh yeah, if your kid's a little shy, martial arts is great for confidence, but it's kind of like a thing that's thrown around without an understanding of how confidence is actually developed. And that's how it's developed, right? It comes from that. It comes from overcoming things, not just inflating people's confidence by telling them they're great, but by putting a struggle in front of them and having them overcome it with help, with coaching. You're not doing it for them, encouraging. But when they actually overcome a struggle, then you see the value in yourself. That's where confidence comes from.
Yes.
It's not an easy thing to build.
I remember I had a student that would flinch when we were practicing with punches, and they would flinch. And what had I said? We had them do this exercise where they would sit in horse stance, and they would have to, it's basically wheeling and winching, but from the elbow alone. I would have them anchor their elbows to their torso, and they could wheel or winch to defend strike. And their partner would have to sit in horse stance opposite them and throw straight punches. That's it. Straight punches. Nothing more complicated than that. And we would make sure to measure the distance nice and close. Not so close that you're going to get hit, so that, they could have that psychological confidence that, they're not going to be accidentally hurt, but close enough that if you don't defend that strike, you'll flinch, right? And started out slowly, punch, block, punch, block, punch, try blocking the other way, speed it up a little. And then, by the end of the class, this person was defending punches a mile a minute. And then I stopped and I said, okay, well, imagine if you ever get into an altercation in the street or at school or whatnot. How many punches do you think you might have to deal with realistically? 1, 2, maybe 3? Well, there you go. People don't punch this fast. So if in class you can handle punches at this rate, do you think you'd feel a little bit more confident about somebody maybe accosting you with 1, right? And then for them, it seemed a lot less daunting. I mean, you take them then and throw them in a situation, and that's a different story, right? Reality is always a different thing. But we're talking about building confidence even in the classroom setting, right?
Yeah.
Just slowly scaffolding and building up from there. It happens. It works.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as there's that experience of success. And
yeah, exactly.
And it's a universal concept. So one thing that, I would like to convey to parents when they're considering getting their child into martial arts is that the universal concept doesn't fade away. Like once someone understands how to build up their confidence and they have that confidence, it applies to everything, right? Oh, I sucked at this and then I tried and I got better. Now I'm good at it. It's a pretty simple concept, but if you don't have that struggle, it's, never going to be internalized. Once it's internalized, it's set. You can explain it and you can read it, but until you've gone through it,
not the same thing.
That's a different thing. It was, there's a one quote I like from Jun Rhee. Jun Rhee was the Taekwondo grandmaster that worked with Bruce Lee, right? And he said that, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, an action is worth 1,000 pictures. Now, I always like that because that's what Kung Fu is. Kung Fu is about action, right? It's not until you put things into action that you can actually, you really understand them, right? And that's the fun thing about Mantis too. And I think we've had almost like an advantage by being trained by Grandmaster Chow, who was not very heavy into dialogue. We had that, you know, you didn't have a choice. We weren't allowed. It's not you weren't allowed to. It's that you didn't bother asking that many questions, because you would just kind of, yeah, you just do it. You do it, and then you'll figure it out. And 9 times out of 10, you did. Oh, now that I did it.
And if you honestly, if you really wanted the answer to that question, the answer was there. It may not have been expressed verbally, but the answer was there.
Oh, it was always there. Just through the action. If we wouldn't explain it to you, it'd still show you, right?
Right.
It makes sense. Or have some kind of good story that also express the meaning too. Grandmaster Child's some really, really good stories. So.
Oh yeah, some great stories. I always loved spear lessons. He had some good stories about some spear techniques. And save that for another conversation. But,
okay. Well, so what do you think if we were to compile top 5 worst or silliest excuses why you wouldn't get into martial arts? What would they be? So I had the one. I'll start with the one I already talked about, right? I think hands down the worst excuse to not getting into martial arts that I hear people, and this is usually not exclusive to, people higher in age, but also it is for parents as well. They sometimes have some silly excuses why not to get their kids into martial art. But the one is the in shape one, right? I want to get into shape first before I get into martial arts. And we hear that around New Year's it's a popular one, because people want to get into it, but yeah, they're going to hit the gym first because that's what everyone else is doing, right? And then you go and, prepay for the year gym membership, going twice, and then never again, right?
It's like saying that you're going to wait until you're smart to go to school. Right?
That's a good point.
Pretty much the same difference.
Yeah. So I think that was top one was, I'll wait till I get in shape. What's another one?
I think another one. Well, I don't think it's one that is said so much as one that is implied. And I think number one implies number two is that people are afraid of looking silly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Anytime you're learning something new, as a beginner, you might look a little silly. And I think that people unfortunately don't learn more new skills for lacking that humility, especially languages, for example. Between languages and martial arts, I think those are 2 things that you're pretty much guaranteed to look silly at the beginning. But you can achieve a high. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think I ever told you this, but I've got this interesting. This is funny. People laugh at this, but like the way we do our system is similar. We do a lot of basics first, right? Mm-hmm. We get into form training a little bit, longer, say 4 or 6 months ish into training, we would start doing forms. Well, we don't test on the forms. Like we let someone learn a form and then we'll test on it, like not right away, but a little bit later. Right. So there's grace period in the SASH system, the ranking system, where you've tested on your basics a couple times. The next step is to testing on forms. But what I make the first requirement to do is just to try your form in front of people. Cause you're right. It's like people are so afraid of looking silly. So I have this rule, and if my students are watching this, they know your first form test, all you need to do is like stand up where you would start, make your way to the furthest point of your form, and then make your way back. So literally, if you wanted to, and I do this in front of them and everyone gets a laugh at it. If you want to do this, and I lay on the ground and then I pencil roll to the other side of the room and I pencil roll back and I stand up and I bow out. And I say, okay, now, so that's, you can do that and I will pass you. You still got to have your basics and you're not going to get away with it your next test. But the first form test, if you do that, I'll let that go, because you just have to get up in front of people, look stupid. Yes. Now that's okay. Now you got that out of the way. You look stupid, right? And I did it to show them first, right?
Yes.
And get that out of the way. And no one's ever done it. I've never actually. I think there might have been one time, I can't remember. Miss Gibbons might be able to tell you if there was one person that did it. But but other than one time, no one's ever taken me up on that. They all end up trying, but it kind of, it takes the pressure off. Like, you just got to get up and look a little bit silly first, right?
Yes.
And then build on that. Yeah. But if you're too afraid of what you're going to look like, it'll hold you up. And especially in Mantis, right? Because like Mantis is such a, you cannot afford to be too rigid if you're going to understand the system. If you're too rigid all the time, you're not going to grasp the power generation from the ground up, right? Like, you're not doing, not again, different systems, not to knock other martial arts, but other martial arts are very, linear, one step, two step, and Mantis tends to be a little bit more dynamic. And if you're too tight, you're really not going to get it. You'll be doing another martial art with maybe a Mantis flair, but you're not going to be doing Mantis until you can relax, which is why we try to make our classes fun, enjoyable, and we have a policy that if anyone is just too cranked and ready to hurt people, then you tell them, well, you might not be a good fit for this, right? Because we want to enjoy the process, not only because everyone wants to be in a nice environment where people are genuinely nice, but if you're rigid and you're too worried about what you're going to look like, you're not going to have that flow that you need to get the power transfer up, right? And ultimately, you think of it both ways, either because you want a nice environment or because you want to learn the system properly. It doesn't matter what reason you're doing it for, but you have to relax in order to get it.
Yep. Indeed. I think that people often probably miss the impact that their contribution to a situation makes on the environment that they then perceive. So, for example, you walk into a class with no conscious perception of what you're bringing with you, how you appear when you walk into that class. Everyone that turns around and looks at you when you walk into that class, however you perceive that class, what you're perceiving is going to be a reaction to what you brought with you. If you walk in happy and smiling, big, I mean, nobody does that, walks into a room and is like, hey, nobody does that, okay? But try it, see how people react to you, right?
Well, yeah, I've got, they're trained, but Mrs. Fenton, she Mrs. Fenton, right? When Logan,
yes.
Mrs. Fenton, she actually does that.
Every
time she comes in, she comes in, hi, and
right.
and lightens up the room all the time.
Right.
But
I bet 9 times out of 10 she gets a positive reaction
every time. I would say 10 out of 10. I've never
seen
it. And if the only time you'd get that reaction that you don't want, that like the negative reaction, is when you're walking into the wrong room. I'm sure that occasionally, not in here, but I'm sure at some point in her life she's walked into the same room.
Yeah, don't walk into a funeral like that, like.
No, I don't mean like. I just mean the room where.
Oh, you mean literally the wrong room?
Well, the wrong room where there's people that are not. People are just miserable. Like, if people are decidedly miserable, right? You're gonna. Which is a rare thing, to get a room full of miserable people, not sad people, miserable.
Yes, there's a difference. There's a difference.
Yeah. Like if you walk into Service Ontario, if anyone's watching from the States, we're talking about our version of the DMV.
The DMV,
yeah. If you're walking,
maybe when you get to the counter, you can turn it up, right? But
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
But yeah.
And then also your expectation, you even being one person, your expectation has an effect on everyone else.
Yeah,
everyone else as well. So it's just you're mirroring, they're mirroring, everyone's mirroring. Right? Yeah. Interesting. What's another one? Oh, I don't want to get this a lot from parents. I don't want to put in martial arts because I think it's going to make them violent.
Yeah,
It sounds so funny to me, but it is a serious concern. You're training violence. Why wouldn't it make you violent? Why wouldn't this make you a violent person? So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's an interesting one, and as you mention it, I don't think I have a professional response for that one as yet, because it's like the thing that comes to mind is that logically, if practicing martial arts made people violent, we would have a lot more violence in the world. I don't know what the statistic is, but think about how many people have taken a karate class in their life, right? The place would be chock full of serial killers. Right? So to me, it's something so inane that I haven't really necessarily formulated a very professional kind of direct response to it beyond kind of, reiterating how safe martial arts are and that we continue to promote ideas of respect and dignity and, respect for the other. And to, we even teach people to love your opponent. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But it's, I don't know. I find it, to me, it's inane, and it's hard to it's hard to bring the sense to the nonsense, right? Like, yeah.
I usually just tell people when they ask me, have you ever been in a fight? I say, well, yeah, but not since I started Kung Fu. I don't know. Yeah, I just, but what causes a lot of fighting is fear, right? When you're afraid of something, that's when you're more likely to get in it, right? You're afraid of losing face. When you're just more afraid and more frantic, you're more likely to fight. That's the way I see it. When you're confident and you don't have anything to prove, you're less likely to get your ego strings pulled at, right?
You see, and when it comes to children and the thing about being violent, the thought that comes to mind is that it gives children a place to spend their energy. I mean, unless we're talking about, the type of kid that like tampers with small animals or like will pluck the legs off a spider or something, really they just want a place to expend some energy. And if children like to hit stuff, martial arts is really the place to be, because they'll be able to do that in a controlled environment under supervision. And it is very clearly indicated to children that this is for the classroom, right? You don't, you don't go into your backyard and or, what can I say? You're not playing with Bunsen burners at home. You save that for the lab at school, right? You're not, you're not playing with the saw at home. You save that for woodshop class, right? Or for younger children. I'm not sure how you might say it, but the point is that there's a time and place for it. This is the time and this is the place with us, right, under supervision. And that's kind of how we deal with it. But I think that one is one of the more unfortunate reasons that people do come up with as to one.
I don't have the time. That's one of my favorite ones. I don't have the time because if you don't have the time, well, either that's an excuse because you don't want to, which is fine. If you don't want to do martial arts, you don't want to do martial arts, but not having the time, it's the same as like meditating, right? That old adage, like if you don't have the time to meditate, you should meditate. What do they say? You should meditate for half hour every day, unless you don't have the time, in which case you should meditate for a full hour every day, right? Like if you can, then you must. Like if you don't have the time to commit to your self-cultivation, your development, building up your strength, your confidence, your focus, well, then it's definitely something that you need to do, right? Like self-cultivation, like for me is well, it's life. Like I don't understand how the concept of self-cultivation is foreign for some people. Like I just thought it was automatic. Like you're here, you're going to be always learning. You're always bettering yourself, right? You're always getting better at everything you do. I don't get how people don't have that. I don't know if it's just something in our brain or whatever. But if you don't have time for your own self-cultivation, well, then you definitely need to self-cultivate so you can get, more time.
Well, that's it, right? Reprioritization. I mean, people got time to sit there and tinker with their vehicles all day, but your primary vehicle, no one gets no real time and attention, right?
Exactly. So really, no one has extra time. It's not a time thing. It's just a priority thing.
Priority,
right? And I would encourage people that whenever they have that instinct to say, I don't have the time, is to quickly catch yourself and flip it, and stop that pattern, because that pattern is usually something that you've learned, right? That's a learned behavior. You've usually heard your parents say it. We don't have time for that. We can't afford it. We don't have time, can't afford it. Like those two things: time, money. We don't have. And it's repeated, and it's constantly reaffirmed, and it's not really your current state. It's just the pattern that you're continually running. And if you interrupt that pattern, you can automatically start to get different results. So I encourage people, they say, catch yourself saying, I don't have time, stop and say, how do I find the time? And get in the habit of always asking yourself, how do I find the time? And then, when you train your brain to ask questions, it's going to keep on working. When you make statements, no, I don't have time, boom, conversation's over. That's it. There's no expansion. There's no thinking. There's no, and that's not trying to solve a problem. You're done. And as soon as you say, well, how do I find the time? Well, now we've got some considerations to make. And well, maybe I got to give up. I got to give up this. I got to give up that. Well, I don't want to. Okay, then I've discerned my priority. And at least now you've made an informed decision. Exactly. And you're not just repeating the same pattern, right? So what were you going to say a second ago?
No, you essentially addressed it. That's pretty much what it is you decide what's important to you. You take a look at what are you actually doing with your time. And, from there, you really have to say, well, what's serving you and what's not. And if you can interrupt your habits and your patterns, like you say, you create space for something else, right? But you won't create the space without maybe first, to use a lack of a better analogy, you may have to make some space. You may have to tear something down, right, and clear the rubble, right? And talking about habits, of course, I'm not saying go throw your Xbox out the window. So I mean, unless your Xbox is a time waster, maybe that's what's got to go. I don't know, but I'm sure there's something there. I'm sure there's something there, right? Because if we're talking about dedicating oneself to attending a class, that is not necessarily something that requires. I mean, that's what, maybe 45 minutes twice a week. Right? It's not like it's every single day, right? And even then, depending on where you're at in your life or even in your training, because life happens. Sometimes, you may have committed to training for a period of time and then life happens and now all of a sudden you can't attend classes. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to abandon your mission, right? It doesn't mean that all of the time and the effort that you put into your training up to this point has to go by the wayside. You find new ways to adapt. If it's 10 minutes a day, if you have some kind of injury and you can't stand, then you work on what you can in a seated position, maybe, right? Whatever it may be, right? But if it's really what you want, you will figure it out. You'll figure out what you have to do to get yourself that much closer. Yeah? You fail when you stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I actually had a student do that. I don't remember what the injury was, but it was pretty severe in that she couldn't, I would tell a student too, like if you have a leg injury, then sit in a chair and do the handwork, right? If you have a hand injury, then just keep your hand close and do your footwork. And she couldn't do either. And she ended up sitting during the class, coming to all the classes. She didn't miss any, and she was taking notes the whole time. Right. And she's a second degree black sash right now.
See, there you go.
Yeah, she didn't stop. But when they like the idea of something, but don't actually want to do the work, that's where they get in trouble. So like, now with when people start Kung Fu, we usually tell them to do 1 minute a day, right?
Yeah.
Because people, when they like the idea of Kung Fu, they want to get into it. They want to get the uniform. They want to get all the toys and everything like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's about the glam, but it's not about the actual work. And then as soon as something gets in the way, it's like, oh, well, I can't do that. No, I'll just quit. And then I'll, another 2 months, I'll find a new obsession to start. And then, and then, bail out at.
Right.
Whereas if you just do what you can while you can, when you can, you keep your momentum going. So you're right. Even if it's 10 minutes a day, if it's 1 minute a day, as long as you're moving forward. And yeah, I'm sure you've had, as I've had, times when you are not able to train as much as you would like, and you just adjust, having faith that, the time will reveal itself once you've carved out, enough of the habit, right? Well, anything else? Anything cool happen? 905. Do we? we've got like the northwest and the southwest of the Golden Horseshoe covered. Any other news in Kung Fu land? We got to see. Maybe we can get Dave on one of these calls next. He's always got a lot of good stuff to add.
Oh yeah. He would love to. He would love to get involved with a chat like this, I'm sure.
Yeah,
yeah. Their art is historically it's a blend of Chinese and Japanese arts, and he and I have had a couple of conversations where I've seen their style and said that looks suspiciously similar. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm sure he'd be amenable to a chat as well. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I ran into a couple of our old colleagues. Daniel came by to visit last week.
You didn't ask if he's still training, did you?
Oh yeah. Well, he said he's feeling inspired to get back into it. So I let that speak for itself. I didn't try to test his hands this time. No.
Yeah. Good. Good.
I had a visit recently from Sam. If you remember Sam.
Yeah, he called me. He called me a few weeks ago for something. Yeah.
Cool. And
good.
More recently, about 2 weeks ago, Bob came by as well, which is kind of interesting. And yeah, so these are just some folks from the old club, and inspired me to go back and have a look at a couple of our demo tapes from back 2010, 2011 era.
I found, I put it on one of our Facebook groups for our Black Sashes. I found an old interview with Grandmaster Chow. Nice. There's there's so much content, from over whatever. There's just 20 years of content that we have, and I would love to share it all. It's just that it comes down to that. Like, we're not holding it back. It's just there's only so much time, and there's so much stuff. But yeah. Anyway, I'll try to release it a little bit, and a little bit more if there's interest in it and stuff like that. Yeah. So anyway, if you want to get together, I mentioned before the call, we might be doing a double tiger hook seminar in March or April. So I hope you can make it down to that. And then students, if you're watching, if you are invited to the honorable banquet, we'll most likely be doing the double tiger hook sword. Thanks to Mrs. Jones for bringing that up. She was asking about that. So we'll throw a good seminar together, get together. Yeah. And anything else that you got going on that you want us to bring a car full of people up there, feel free to let us know.
Yeah.
Right?
So we will be planning another open house for May, either late April or May. Once we get the date pinned down, we'll let you all know. But awesome. We will be planning another open house. So anyone who is interested in coming down to participate, more than welcome to have you. Or
awesome.
Love to have you. You're more than welcome.
Awesome. Okay. We'll keep in touch, and we'll let everyone know about that. And then I will talk to you. We'll have this again in a couple of weeks, right?
Awesome. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Sifu Deal. Thank you very much. Have a good night. We'll talk to you soon.
You too.